Good morning, everyone. Good morning again. It is so great to be here, especially since I missed a couple of weeks, and I feel great, and this is great, and you all look great, and it's a great day, and great. So, I didn't come because there's certain things you want to share with your community, and there are other things you don't want to share. Like a little case of COVID, but anyway. So, it brought to my mind, because we teach that we have a choice, that we can be healthy. We teach spiritual mind treatment and how we can use that to improve our health. And so then, on the other hand, even people who've been trained in treatment for a long time, ministers, practitioners, people who've been coming here for years, sometimes we get sick anyway, and we don't deny it like, oh, it's not really happening, because we're also religious science, which means we're supposed to admit the truth. Whatever is happening, but we know that we live both in our material reality, but also in another realm, which is our spiritual reality. And so what we do is we can center ourselves in the greater truth of health. And it's amazing how that helps our health unfold in good ways. So the reason why I wanted to say that is because, like Reverend Maureen was saying, we always offer to do prayer treatment work for anyone every Sunday. So in my case, I wasn't really feeling that badly, but I realized I had become afraid. I had become afraid that I was going to relapse or get really sick. And so I contacted our prayer team and I asked for treatment, not just to get better, but to also not be afraid. And so I just wanted, we share our experiences. I want to share that with you. That sometimes, even though intellectually we know that we can do our own treatment, we need to also recognize the truth that our consciousness is being blocked by fear or whatever else, or just by, needing to be asleep and not awake, depending on what it is. And so we have this wonderful community. So I feel grateful for this community and know that, it's here for all of us. So no matter how much we go home and read or study the science of mind, it's really nice to know that we can come here and rely upon each other to validate what we're doing and to help us when we need help, because treatment works. I didn't relapse, and I instantly didn't feel afraid anymore. And I was reminded, there's always a silver lining. I was reminded how nice it is to be part of this community. However, at the same time, although we all try to make the best of our experiences, Ernest Holmes, the author of Science of Mind, said over and over again, the world has learned all it should through suffering. We don't really have to keep learning through the school of hard knocks only. We don't have to learn just by suffering. Still, even though I know that each one of us is a perfect spiritual being having a human experience, I also have to recognize that we're not robots, we're not controlled by some outside destiny or fate. We don't live our life like grains of sand rolling around on the beach, moved by the waves or the wind blowing. Instead, we each are living a life of adventure. The great adventure of freedom. And then this is the trick to it all. Because we are free, to have this wonderful adventure in life, well, we're also free not just to be happy, but we're free to suffer or be unhappy. And we learn through all our experiences, through our mistakes and suffering, as well as from our good choices and our happy outcomes. So we have a lot of experiences and we figure things out. But we can also learn from each other. So, lucky for you, Reverend Maureen and I didn't have to invent the science of mind, right? We had teachers who taught us, and we're here to explain more. And I believe we can also learn from what you would call direct revelation. So when we go into meditation, we might have insights and new understanding. And of course, you always hear in the news about someone who claimed that they had a message from God, and it's like, I don't really think so. And that's the other great thing about community. We can come back and we can exchange our experiences and our insights, and we can validate each other or say, hey, maybe you need to think about it this way, or yes, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And that's a wonderful thing about community. So we learn from ourselves, we learn from each other, we learn in so many ways. And at the same time, we're not just us learning, we're also very connected. We're very connected to each other. We're also very connected to everything, everywhere. We do have our individual consciousness, but we also have what is generally called, or used to be called, race consciousness, referring to the human race. But I think it's better to describe it as something like a shared collective consciousness. That's how a lot of our kind of unconscious reactions that a person would have, those are formed not necessarily because we ever thought about it, but we were raised in a certain culture, and we just kind of absorb it as we're growing up. You know, and all over the world, you hear about these archaeological discoveries, or you find out that some historian has just managed to translate some ancient cuneiform tablet or something, and they're finding about the things that people used to do, the stories that people used to tell, the things that people do all over the world, the stories that they tell, and there's this amazing commonality. It's like things just emerge into humanity, and I believe it's just another demonstration of how connected we are, and that there's something intrinsic about this spiritual adventure that we are all embarked on that makes it so that over and over these types of stories come up. So you know, we call some of these stories, the ones that Maureen and I have been talking about, as our kind of August staycation. We call it a staycation. Here we are in Carlsbad, but we want to have a little fun. Is we've been looking at folk tales. So you already know what the theme of today is. It's been given away, but still, you know, I was thinking today it would be fun to look at the story of Beauty and the Beast. And it is a classic story. I think the best known versions, modern versions that we know, are mostly based on the French fable that was written down in the 1700s. But there's a lot of versions, and there's other versions all over the world that have kind of a similar theme of the maiden and the snake, the maiden and the swan. Some kind of a, you know, beast of some sort or other and a strange courtship. So, my favorite version of Beauty and the Beast, because there's so many, and it's good for you guys because it's shorter than some versions, is from a very famous French movie. So, you know, you can see it now. You can find it on the internet or even watch it streaming for free. So I think it's called La Belle et la Bête, although despite my last name, I don't speak French, so I don't know exactly. But it's Beauty and the Beast in French. The movie was the movie was made in 1946. And it's kind of magical, it's all black and white, and of course they didn't have special effects. They just had beautiful costumes, and I guess they could do their magic by, you know, turning the camera off and moving something and turning the camera back on again. So, but it worked, it was good. And so I'd like to maybe share that story with you and invite you as you listen to think of yourself as each character, you know, and I'm sure you'll have your favorite character. But that's one good way to think about stories is, what about that character is like me? What about that character really repels me? I don't like it all, you know? What about that character appeals to me? So anyway, you know how the story begins and you know how the story ends. So let's start at the beginning, like all folk tales. It begins once upon a time. Once upon a time, there was a man whose wife had died, but he was a wealthy man, he was a widower, and he had 3 grown daughters and a son. He lived with them. He was a merchant who had ships that sailed around the world, bringing things back to sell. But unfortunately, his ships were attacked by pirates, and they never came back, and the family was thrown into poverty. One of his daughters, the beautiful Beauty, or Belle was her name, was very sweet, and she adapted to the poverty by deciding to work hard every day and keep the household going. Meanwhile, her 2 sisters were in total denial. They couldn't admit that their family had lost their status, and so they just insisted that nothing had changed. They kept dressing up and going to town, but it wasn't really the truth of their situation. They kept pretending that they were still wealthy. And Belle's brother also, like Belle, helped around the farm and did a lot of chores, along with his best friend, Avenant, who claimed to be in love with Belle. Although Belle always refused his offers and proposals, saying, no, I need to stay with my father. But also, she realized that her brother's friend was just like her brother. Yes, they worked, but they also spent the rest of their time in town, at the tavern, or gambling with their friends. So they were good-natured, but they were very irresponsible. So life went on, and then suddenly the family got some wonderful news. One of the ships had actually made it back to port. They were so happy, they were rejoicing, and the father was ready to go to the city by the sea where his ship was, and with thoughts that his wealth would be restored. And as he was getting ready to leave, he asked his children, he asked his daughters what they would like for him to bring back from the city. And one of his daughters said, oh, bring me back a parrot. And the other daughter said, bring me a monkey. And Belle said, I don't really need anything. But he insisted, the father, please, Belle, please tell me, something I can bring. And finally she said, well, bring me a rose. Our mother loved roses, and we don't have any roses growing around here. So just bring me a rose. So, I don't know what the brother wanted. Probably money. But anyway, off goes the father with high hopes that his fortune will be restored. Now, the siblings were very happy, and while their father was off on his journey, Belle's brother, thinking in his mind that the family was going to be okay again, decided that he would do a little more gambling and borrow a lot more money, and he signed away his family's assets when he took out the loan. But he was sure it wouldn't be a problem. However, when the father got to the city by the sea, it turned out that the ship and all its contents had been confiscated by the investors who had invested in the other ships that had been lost. So really, in the end, he ended up with nothing. He didn't even have the money to stay at an inn in the city, and so, although it was getting late, he turned around and headed back home in the night, feeling very sad. Perhaps even absent-minded. He traveled home through the forest, and a great fog came up. He went through the fog and realized he'd gotten lost. And suddenly, right in front of him was a big gate to a mansion. And he stopped and looked, and the gate opened wide. And so he thought, well, maybe he could stay there and get a drink. So he went through the gate and went up to the door and was just about to knock on the door when magically the door opened. And he just felt the impulse to walk right in. And when he got in, he saw that he was in a large chamber with candlelight and a fire burning in the fireplace, a big fire, a great big long table was there, and food was set out, a feast for one. Only one place setting at the table, no one else around. So he sat down, and he went ahead and ate. And then he fell asleep. Still nothing. When he woke up, he went around and thought he would look for someone. He went out into the grounds again. He saw no one, so he thought, well, I guess I'll go back home. And as he was leaving, he saw in the yard a beautiful rose. So he picked it for Belle, thinking that, well, he could at least bring back one thing. He would bring her a rose. But the moment he picked the rose, suddenly a strange beast appeared right in front of him. A huge beast with the face of a lion, all dressed in a prince's clothes, standing upright like a man, dressed like a prince, but truly a beast. And the beast was so angry with the father for stealing the rose. He said, I'm going to kill you. I gave you everything. I gave you my hospitality. I gave you food and drink. And look what you've done. You've stolen from me. Well, the father argued and begged and said, oh, but I have to go home to my children, my daughters, my son. And so the beast relented and said, well, I'll let you go, but you're going to have to send back one of your daughters in your place. Well, naturally, the father agreed and went off. Right? Some fathers are like that, I guess. So sadly, he went home. Actually, he got to ride home on a magic horse. Because, of course, there needed to be a way to get the daughter back again. So anyway, he got home on his magic horse and told his family what happened, and they were so sad. And none of the kids wanted to go back to the Beast's mansion, of course, except Belle. Belle said, "Oh, Father, you plucked the rose for me, I will go back." And so she got on the horse and magically arrived back at the mansion. Maybe she was feeling very brave, but she took one look at the Beast and fainted from fear. It was so upsetting. Now, if you get a chance to see the movie, they have a long period of time and a lot of scenes where Belle is just, in magic princess attire, and the Beast is wandering through the halls and always stays away from her, but sort of gives her everything. And so it's kind of this, you obviously can tell that he cares for her and wants to keep her safe, but she's very shy of him, although she just stops fainting. But eventually they kind of strike a truce, let's call it a truce. So she lives there, not too unhappy, except that he gives her a magic mirror. And in this magic mirror, she's able to look back at her home and her family. And she discovers two things. One, that while she was away, because her brother had signed away all the family assets, the moneylender had come and taken everything from them except for their beds. And that her father had gotten very ill and was lying in bed, sick. So Belle begged the Beast, "Please, Beast, I need to go home and see my family." And the Beast said, "No," but finally he relented and said, "Okay, I will let you go, but you have to promise to be back in 1 week. If you're gone longer than 1 week, I'm going to die of a broken heart." And he also said, "And if I die, I want you to have all my treasure." So he gave her the key to his treasure to take with her, and also a magic glove to travel with. Wow. And she said, "No, don't worry, Beast, I'll be back. No, don't worry, I will keep my word. I will come back in a week." And so off she goes, she gets to her family, and being such a naive, sweet person, she tells her family all about her life and the treasure and how she's got the key. And well, what do you think happened? Well, of course, her siblings figure out, "Oh my gosh, we could steal the key, and the brother and his friend can go kill the Beast, and then we'll live happily ever after with all that treasure." So they tricked Belle, and when she's sleeping, they steal the key, and off they go. And Belle is scared because she knows she needs to go back, and she can't find, I guess she had the horse too. Oh, I know, the Beast sent the horse to get her. And so she was so worried. Finally, she goes back to the mansion. I don't know if she used the glove or the horse or whatever. Lots of magic in this story. But she goes back, and gosh, she discovers the Beast. And in fact, he is dying of a broken heart. And as he is just breathing his last gasp, she suddenly realizes that she loves him and sheds a tear, which of course comes out as a diamond. And miraculously, the Beast comes to life and is a handsome prince. And I'm not going to go into all the details. You can watch the movie or read the story, but you know what happens next. The story ends like all good fairy tales. And they lived happily ever after, right? So I just think that this story, Beauty and the Beast, is kind of an appropriate new thought story because, you know, everyone's having adventures. Even the selfish sisters are having adventures of trying to, you know, be something that they're not, and how can they make it happen, and how can they dress up and pretend. And the brother is having an adventure where he actually, you know, was a wastrel, but of course he felt so sad that he had brought even more ruin upon his family, that he was trying to figure out what to do about it and came up with this absolutely horrible idea of going after the beast. And but it was still his misbegotten adventure. And of course, Belle herself had her own adventure of being true, being a good person, but also not trusting. So yes, she was in this situation where she had all this good, she had these gowns, she had all the food, she was living a life of luxury, but she never trusted her feelings towards the beast, who was the hidden prince. So they all had these adventures, and in the end, it was the realization of love that transformed the whole situation. So I actually, you know, so to me, the hidden message is love, and you know that because we've been singing and talking about love today. But I naturally had to look on the internet, what is the hidden meaning of, hidden message for Beauty of the Beast? And I was like, oh, it's that virtue is rewarded. Well, yeah, but that's not enough. So I had sent an email to Rick saying what we were going to talk about today. And I think maybe it puzzled him when it was Beauty of the Beast. But he wrote back, if you don't mind my saying, he wrote back, it was so good what he said. He said, well, I guess beauty is the essence of divinity, and the material world is sometimes beastly. And I was like, yeah, that's like the whole point of this talk. Short and sweet. But to dig into it a little more, and remember, everybody gets to make up their own mind about the meaning of the story. I felt that Belle represented that part within us all that is loving. That voice within our minds that exemplifies love and light and truth and power and all the good attributes. Yes. And that the sisters and the brothers and other family members represent the other voices in our head. The constant chattering about, well, I need this, I don't have this, I want this, I'm worried, I'm selfish, I'm greedy, I'm cowardly, I feel afraid, and just a general ungratefulness. So we have this dichotomy between the two aspects. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who sometimes feel like I'm of two minds, or sometimes 24 minds, right? Well, the beast, I believe, represents what you could think of as the other. You know, when we talk about othering other people, seeing other people, other things in the world, as different from us, not like us, not like our brothers or sisters or family. But then gradually, of course, it's revealed that he is, in fact, united, one, just like everyone else, one with us. And so the question becomes, what created the change? Was it the time that they spent together that gradually melted down the wall between Belle and the beast? Was it Belle's final ability to overcome her prejudice that changed the situation? well, maybe something in the beast actually changed. Maybe in truth, she did tame his feelings so that he too went from threatening to kill to falling in love. So there was definite change in the story. When we get caught up in the material world and feeling needy or like a victim, when we start, I say we, maybe I should say when I don't want to make assumptions, when I start looking at other people as being less than they could be, less than they should be, or suspicious, or just different. When we see other people as not being like us, what happens is we actually then begin to feel like we're living in a world of strangers, a world of threats. We feel separate from others, and this feeling gradually begins to make us feel separate from life itself, separate from our Creator, separate from this thing called life. And we call this feeling of separation a belief in duality, material and spiritual, not being one. On the other hand, when we're able to stay centered in spiritual principles and see the world through the eyes of love, we see that every person is one with life itself. Actually, every being is one with life itself. That we can never be separate from our Creator because, after all, Spirit is all there is. And so seeing this, we feel a sense of community, of connectedness, and we call this a belief in unity, of our oneness. So I wanted to share something I found, and it was perfect for that song you sang earlier, Rick, but it's a short paragraph by Thomas Merton, who was a 20th century Trappist monk and mystic. And he shared an insight he had about humanity during one of his meditations. He wrote, thinking of people, "Then it was as if I suddenly saw the secret beauty of their hearts, the depths of their hearts, where neither sin nor desire nor self-knowledge can reach, the core of their reality, the person that each one is in God's eyes. If they could all see themselves as they really are, how they shine. If only we could see each other that way all the time, there would be no more war, no more hatred, no more cruelty, and no more greed." And I think that's about right. You know, we don't need a magic mirror, we don't need a magic horse, we don't need a magic glove, we don't need a magic key to recognize the truth, to recognize our oneness. The only thing we need is love. All we need is love. Love paves the way. It's the same story for all of us. We are one. That's the truth. And so it is.